The Eswatini government is accusing journalist Dlamini of terrorism. Dlamini is currently exiled from West Eswatini and living in South Africa. The government accused Dlamini's publication of supporting the Swaziland International Solidarity Forces during the 2021 protests where dozens of civilians were killed. The country is now asking Mpumalanga High Court in South Africa to intervene in the matter. Well, we spoke to journalist Dlamini yesterday. So let's bring in the Eswatini government spokesperson this morning, Mr. Alpheos Nxumalo. Mr. Nxumalo, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I believe you have, in fact, seen that interview that we conducted yesterday morning with Dlamini. And perhaps a good place to start would be what you intend to do in approaching the Mpumalanga High Court for intervention. Let's start there.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me in Newzroom Africa. I didn't actually watch that interview, but you can tell more or less Israeli have done an interview somewhere as to what is the contents. It's always a context of distortions and a context of fictions all the time. However, let's capture very clear the genesis of the conflict that Zweli had with the authorities of the country, especially when he offended the law for the first time. Zweli's problems and challenges did not start with the unrest of 2021. The genesis of his problem is actually prior to the unrest of 2021. The agencies of the law were looking for him to appear in court to answer two cases, basically. That of threatening to shoot somebody, housebreaking, and failure to appear in court. And then he relocated to South Africa. As we speak right now, we are not aware or sure of his status in the Republic of South Africa. Is he an illegal immigrant, or is he a refugee given legally that status by the Republic of South Africa? We are not aware. However, coming straight to your question, which I'm here to respond to, not to Zweli. Your question is, what exactly are we seeking for from the Mpumalanga High Court? From the Mpumalanga High Court, the government has made an application to bring Zweli to answer on a number of terrorism charges which he has conducted in the past through his terrorism publication called Swazi News, and him perpetrating, joining, abetting terrorism activities where a number of people in the country, including security officers and innocent people such as a chief, were ruthlessly murdered. And Zweli was in the forefront in many aspects. He was not only encouraging the murderous expedition of that time, he was also, through his publication, promising to reward those who are going to carry merciless murders of a Maswati. Secondly, Zweli have made a number of serious allegations, untested allegations against the authorities in the country, reporting stories which are not factual, which are not only disingenuous, but which are also very seditious. So we wanted the Mpumalanga Court to make an intervention. Zweli was supposed to appear on the 13th of this month. Unfortunately, he was dropped by his own lawyers for reasons best known to him, and the Mpumalanga High Court have given him an extension, which is the last extension and postponement, by the way, to the 26th of this month, where he is supposed and expected to have deposited his arguments through his lawyers. And otherwise, then the case will take on. All
right. So let me do this, because, and I know that we've brought you on really to give you right of reply to some of the points that he made in our interview with him yesterday. Let's listen to some of the things he had to say, Mr. Nxumalo.
Certainly, the Suppression of Terrorism Act of 2008 is being used against dissenting views. It is being used against political activists and human rights defenders, and of course to target journalists who are critical of the regime. So terrorism is a very, very serious crime in terms of international law. In fact, all countries, the UN urged all countries to ensure that terrorism is eradicated, to ensure that the world is peaceful and live in harmony. But oppressive regimes like the Eswatini government, they are manipulating that to target those who are critical of the Nkundla system of governance.
Right. That was Zweli Dlamini speaking to us yesterday, editor of Swaziland News. I repeat what he says: an oppressive regime using the word terrorism to clamp down on those that are critical of the regime. How do you respond to that?
It's him who brings it to your attention that the fight against terrorism is actually a requirement by international law. All members of the United Nations are expected to put in place legislations and mechanisms to contain and fight terrorism. So he cannot conveniently say today these countries, including the Kingdom of Eswatini, is using the Terrorism Act of 2008 to clamp down on dissenting voices. That is the usual rhetoric and distortions associated with Zweli, if you know him for who he is. This country has got a lot of dissenting views. We have got a lot of Emaswati who are residing in this country who does not only agree with the system of governance in place, who also does not even agree with the way and the manner in which our government take decisions. We are accommodating everyone in this country. Emaswati are thinking differently. Emaswati are intellectuals. That's why even those who are applying their trade and profession outside this country are holding high-ranking offices, because Emaswati are educated. You cannot buckle them. You cannot make them think alike. What Zweli is doing is exactly a very lame excuse. I have already given you the reasons why Zweli is in South Africa. Zweli has never been a journalist worth the salt calling himself a journalist. Look what he writes his stories. Full of distortions, full of insults. He is using what we call in information security social engineering, using deception and manipulation so that people can divulge information and use that information to pickpocket people and scandalize people. He has never been a journalist worth his salt. All his stories, they will tell you one thing: I sent a questionnaire, there was no response. Why respond to somebody whom you know very well that what you say from your side won't matter?
Yeah,
he must come back home. He must come back home and face the law.
What do you say then about even international outcry around some of the activities that we've seen coming out of Eswatini, certainly in the past year or so? I mean, one of the things we talked about as well was the murder of lawyer Thulani Maseko and how that remains unresolved and unsolved. So what role is the Eswatini government then playing in bringing solutions to or resolutions to that matter, when this is someone who was seen as a human rights defender, and Amnesty International has also raised the alarm around the issues that you have with these pro-democracy protests that were seen even in 2021?
Thank you very much for raising up that question, and I'm sure you are raising it now for, I think, for the fourth, fifth time since I have an opportunity to engage with Newzroom Africa. The investigations are not only done in isolation. Remember, the victims of that killing expeditions of that period of time, we lost a lot of Emaswati. Some of them include members of security forces, some of them include chiefs, some of them include ordinary persons. Some were shot while they were just attending national ceremonies such as Ingwal. We have legal and constitutional state apparatus in this country who are investigating all these matters in parallel with that of Mr. Thulani. And I can tell you now, as I do, breakthrough have been made in some of them. We have apprehended some people who are already behind bars, including the so-called commander who was working hand in hand with his partner, Dlamini, in murdering Emaswati in this country. We are going to make a breakthrough in all those murderous cases. The government of Eswatini played no role, and we do not want to cast aspersions in terms of who is responsible or was responsible for the matter of Thulani, because if we were to do that, we will then also going to begin to name those whom we also suspect to have been involved in the matter of Thulani Maseko, and that doesn't help. Other than to wait for proper investigations.
All right, Mr. Nxumalo, I'm going to squeeze in one last question here. Again, you've approached the High Court in Mpumalanga. I mean, what conversations is the Swati government having with the South African government, firstly, and why is this a matter for South Africa then to intervene in?
No, it is not South Africa that is intervening. It is the court. We have approached the court. Anyone, anywhere in the world can approach a court, rightfully so, especially because the person that is a subject of the court in this case is residing or is claiming to be residing in South Africa. We don't know under what status, refugee, officially refugee status, or an illegal immigrant. So long as South African can be able to get him to come to court and answer his charges faced by court, we are ready for that case. And we are sure that the Mpumalanga High Court will rule on our favor, not because they like us or like our arguments, but because of the merit that we are presenting before court.
All right, Mr. Nxumalo, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, we'll be watching the steps that you take from now onwards towards the Mpumalanga High Court very closely. Mr. Alpheos Nxumalo is the Eswatini government spokesperson speaking to us there.